Talk a little bit about the molecules of emotion, especially when it comes to depression. So the hypothalamus is part of the emotional brain and the limbic system, and its neurons have axons. And these axons, they extend out to the pituitary gland, which sits below it. These axons, they secrete a neuropeptide called CRF, cortical releasing factor, which controls the release of another informational substance. When CRF hits the pituitary gland, it stimulates the secretion of ACTH, which is the informational substance that then travels through our bloodstreams to the adrenal glands, and it binds to specific receptors on our adrenal cells. Now you can say that the adrenal glands are responsible or play a part in the fight or flight response in our body. Adrenaline is what causes the fight or flight response when the body's natural unconscious reaction to threats are either real or imagined. Another thing that our adrenal glands do when ACTH hits them is it creates steroids in the body. Okay, and this steroid makes corticosterone, a substance that is necessary for healing and damage control when an injury has occurred. In depressed people, they typically have high levels of these stress steroids. And in fact, depressed people are in a chronic state of ACTH activation because of this disrupted feedback loop that fails to signal when there are sufficient levels of steroid in the blood. So this CRF ACTH axis just keeps pumping out more and more steroids, and actually autopsies almost always show a tenfold higher level of CRF in the cerebral spinal fluid of those who killed themselves compared to those who died from other causes. So we could say that CRF is the peptide of negative expectations, since it may have been stimulated by negative experiences in our childhood. Now, there's been animal studies, specifically monkey babies, right, that have been deprived of maternal nurturing, neglected, and abused, and in effect have high levels of CRF and also really high levels of that steroid. And so depressed people tend to get stuck in a disruptive feedback loop that is out of control. And that feedback loop is like resistant to any kind of drug therapy that aims at suppression of these steroids. So in humans, this can result in extremely limited patterns of behavior and response, which eventually drive people into the emotional black hole, aka depression. And the reason we can get stuck like this is because these feelings get retained in the memory, not just in the brain, but all the way down to our cellular level. So as CRF levels increase in highly stressed infants or children, the receptors of CRF become desensitized, shrinking in size and decreasing in number. And these changes will happen when receptors are flooded with a drug, whether it's a drug our body is going to produce or naturally, or a drug that you buy at the pharmacy. The memory of the trauma gets stored. So the memory of the trauma is stored by these and other changes at the level of the neuropeptide receptor, some occurring deep in the interior of the cell, at the very roots of our receptors, taking place within the entire body. In our society today, unfortunately, our drug therapy is the main direction for research at this time. But the good news is that there are such potential, lots of potential and possibility for non-drug interventions. And a perfect example of that is going back to the monkey experiment and research study that they did. In another study to determine maternal influence, they had a group of monkey babies that were raised by a fake monkey mother. It was a wire cloth structure and with milk bottles instead of breasts, and the babies were fed and not touched, cuddled, or held. They all soon quickly developed signs of trauma and depression. These researchers did was they brought in what they called a monkey hug therapist. And this was an older monkey, okay? And the older monkey who constantly hugged and cuddled these stressed out monkey babies. And that hugging, just that simple act of hugging, it broke that feedback loop. And it sent the message that no more steroids were needed. So their damage was done and over with, and the chronically elevated levels of CRF came down significantly. And so the power of touch can help stimulate and regulate our natural chemicals, the ones that are tailored to precisely the right times and the appropriate dosages, and maximize our feelings of health and well-being. So if you're on a healing journey right now, bringing touch into your healing process, it may be able to offer another kind of help to people who are experiencing mood disorders such as depression and more. Just as we can harness the power of our minds for physical healing, so can we do physical things to help heal our feelings. We must believe, okay, that the body is a gateway. Wilhelm Reich and Alexander Lowen made attempts at introducing a more body-linked approach and believing the body to be a gateway to the mind and working with different forms of emotional release. So that's when they talk about the mind-body connection. Yeah. And in recent years, there has been plenty of animal studies and human studies that show the benefits of touch, not only for depression, but for illnesses that have physical symptoms as well. Our minds have so much power, and our brain and the way we think and what we believe in ultimately will determine our reality and manifestations of such. So, for example, if you are being bombarded with a bunch of negative thoughts and emotions and trauma that you haven't addressed, it will manifest in the form of illnesses within your body in one shape, form, or another. So be mindful of what you believe in, be mindful of your thoughts, and there's lots of power we hold within what we think and what we believe.